Using a graphing calculator or computer to determine which of the given viewing rectangles produces the most appropriate graph of the function f of x, which is equal to the square root of x cubed minus 5x squared. So the first part I'm going to use is the TI 83 plus calculator. So the thing we want to do is we're going to go ahead and select y equals and then put in our function, which is the square root of x cubed minus 5x squared. So here's our graph, and now we want to go ahead and then look at part A. What would the window look like? So if we put in -5 for the x minimum, putting in +5 for the x max, we're going to put the scale at 1. We'll leave the scale at 1. And then the y minimum is going to be -5. And the y max is going to be 5. We'll leave the scale and the resolution. So let's go ahead and graph that. So the lines over here is telling us whether it's graphable. Nothing is in here. Now let's look at what it looks like when we graph using Desmos. So we're going to put in the function, the square root of x cubed minus 5x squared, and let's put in the viewing window like they have there. So we have -5, -5, and 5. So if we take this viewing window, we do not see the graph. So now let's take a look at what the graph's going to look like with this dimension. So when we look at the viewing rectangles for part B, it's going to go from 0 and then to 10. And then the minimum is 0 for y, and then going to 2. And so let's graph. So we can see this graph. Let's change the same thing in Desmos. So we're going to go from 0 to 10 on the x-axis, and then 0 to 2. And so there's what our graph looks like. So that is part B. Now let's try the viewing window for the part C. So we're going to go to 0 to 10. We're going to keep that at 0 to 10. Y minimum, we're going to leave it 0, and then use the y max at 10. And now we see this graph. So over here, we're also going to choose 10. And we can see that this graph shows a better sort of appropriate graph for this graph using those viewing rectangles. So what we're going to do is we're going to say that the most appropriate graph is produced viewing rectangle C. And again, let's take a look at the examples here. So the first one here was the first one we did. There was no graph shown. The second one, part B, this is what the graph showed. And then part C had that graph, and therefore part C was the most appropriate graph using that viewing rectangle.